Who's going to be a part of the 10-win club in 2021? Let's go. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I do college football videos every single day. Don't forget to check out my friends at Tri-State Wood Sketch. All you have to do is send him a picture, and he'll turn it into a beautiful piece of art on wood. Check out his website at www.tristatewoodssketch.com. Tell him Golden Blue Dude sent you, and you'll get 20% off. Today, we're going to talk about the 10-win club and who could be in it in 2021. For the sake of argument, I'm not going to talk about Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, or Ohio State. I think all 5 of those teams will definitely get 10 wins. First, we'll start off with Conference USA. Just one team, and it's because these fans have been bugging me. Marshall. In 2019, they went 8-5, and in 2020, they went 7-3. I think Marshall does have a slight chance of getting 10 wins, but it's basically because of their schedule. Key games to getting to 10 wins is that first game at Navy, and a road trip to Appalachian State, and the last game of the year, Western Kentucky. So based strictly off of the strength of schedule, or lack thereof, yeah, Marshall has a pretty good shot at getting 10 wins. Now for the Mountain West, the first team, San Jose State. In 2019, they went 5-7, and then last year in 2020, they went 7-1. I think this team has a pretty good shot at getting 10 wins. Key games at USC, home game against San Diego State, and then at Nevada. So if they can just win one of those 3 games and not slip up and lose to a team that they shouldn't lose to, San Jose State has a legitimate shot at getting to 10 wins. The other team in the Mountain West that has a pretty good shot, Boise State. We forget about Boise State. They're still a pretty good team. In 2019, they went 12-2. Last year in 2020, they went 5-2. Key games at UCF, a home game against Oklahoma State, at BYU, then at San Diego State. So if they can win their home game against Oklahoma State, which I think they actually will, and then win a road game, there you go. Boise State has a 10-win season. Now the Sun Belt, the first team, Louisiana. This team is doing better and better under Bill Napier. In 2019, they went 11-3, so they didn't just come out of nowhere last year. And last year, they went 10-1. Key games at Texas, at Georgia Southern. Yes, Georgia Southern is a good team, because in 2019, they went 7-6, then last year, 8-5. A home game against Appalachian State, then at Liberty. So if Louisiana can go 2-2 in those 4 games and then win the other games that they're supposed to win, they will have a 10-win season. I fully expect the Raging Cajuns to have a 10-win season. Next up, Appalachian State. In 2019, they went 13-1. That was only 2 years ago, guys. In 2020, they went 9-3. Key games to getting to that 10-win mark. A home game against the Hurricanes, Miami. A home game against Marshall, at Louisiana. A home game against Coastal Carolina, and a home game against Georgia Southern. So 4 of those 5 key games are at home. They can go 3-2 in those 5 games and win the other games they're supposed to win. Appalachian State will have a 10-win season. So a fairly decent shot for Appalachian State to get to 10 wins. The last team in the Sun Belt, Coastal Carolina. They actually did come out of nowhere last year. In 2019, they were 5-7. Last year, 11-1. Here's their key games. A tricky road game to Buffalo. That can be a tough place to play. Then a road trip to Appalachian State, and then a road trip to Georgia Southern. So all 3 of their key games are on the road. But if they can win one of those, win the other games that they're supposed to win, Coastal Carolina will have another 10-win season. Next up, the AAC. Of course, the first team you have to talk about, Cincinnati. 2019, 11-3. Then last year, 1 win shy. They went 9-1. Key games at Indiana, at Notre Dame. Then the home game against UCF, and a home game against Tulsa. If they can go 2-2 in those 4 games, win the others that they're supposed to win, there you go, 10 wins. Those are 2 tough road games, Indiana and Notre Dame. Then UCF and Tulsa, those aren't gimmies as well. I think Cincinnati will go undefeated, but this is not a gimme. But I think they have a fairly decent shot of at least having a 10-win season. Next team, UCF. In 2019, they did have a 10-win season, 10-3. Last year, they went 6-4. Here's their key games. A home game against Boise State, at Louisville, at Cincinnati, and a home game against Memphis. That's a tricky slate, but if they can go 2-2 right there, win the other games that they're supposed to, they'll have a 10-win season. Another team that people have forgotten about in the AAC, Memphis. In 2019, they went 12-2, a pretty good season. In 2020, they went 8-3. Key games at Tulsa, at UCF, and then maybe that home game against Mississippi State. Schedule for Memphis definitely benefits them. If they can win 1 out of those 3 games, win the others that they're supposed to win, they will have a 10-win season. And I think that's exactly what happens. I think Memphis does have a 10-win season this year. Last team in the AAC, Tulsa. 2019, they went 4-8. Last year, 6-3. Here's their key games. At Oklahoma State, at Ohio State, a home game against UCF, and then at Cincinnati. So 3 of those 4 are on the road. If they can go 2-2 in that slate and win the other games that they're supposed to win, they will have a 10-win season. I think Tulsa falls just short 10 wins this this year. Now on to the ACC. Remember, not talking about Clemson. The first team, Miami, in 2019, 6-7. Yeah, they were actually bad that year. Last year, though, they went 8-3. High expectations this year. 4 key games on their schedule. Home game against Appalachian State. That's not a gimme game. Appalachian State is a good team, and they have been known for upsetting people. Take that game seriously. At North Carolina, then a home game against a good NC State team, and then at Pitt. If they can win 3 of those games, because I'm already counting that Alabama game as a loss, then win all the other games that they're supposed to win, there you go, a 10-win season. I think Miami's right on that fringe. I think they could do it, but they could fall just short. This is going to be interesting to watch. The next team in the ACC, North Carolina. 2019, they went 7-6, and then last year, 8-4. They also have high expectations. Their key games, home game against Miami, at Notre Dame, at Pitt, at NC State. If they can go 2-2 in that stretch, win the other games they're supposed to win, they'll have a 10-win season. The issue is 3 of those 4 games are on the road. That's going to be tough. I think North Carolina has the talent to do it, but they can't sleepwalk in any of these games. Learn your lesson from last year at Florida State, North Carolina, and you will get to 10 wins. Last team in the ACC, NC State. People are sleeping on the Wolfpack. 2019, they were 4-8, and then last year, a great turnaround in 2020, 8-4. And really, they just have 3 key games that could decide if they have 10 wins or not. At Boston College. Boston College is going to be better than people realize. At Miami, then the home game against North Carolina. If they can win 2 of those 3 games, because I'm already counting Clemson as an automatic loss, and then win all the other games that they're supposed to win, they'll have a 10-win season. I think NC State will surprise people and have a 10-win season 2021. Next up, the Pac-12, the first team, Oregon. In 2019, they actually had a good season, 12-2. Last year, took a step back, went 4-3. Oregon has 5 key games on their schedule that will determine if they have 10 wins or not. That first game, at Ohio State, at Stanford. Stanford is good, people. Don't sleep on them. At UCLA, Washington, and at Utah. So every single one of their key games are on the road, and they have to go 3-2 to get to that 10-win mark and win all the other games they're supposed to. I think the Ducks fall short of 10 wins this year. That's just too tough of a road slate. Next up, Washington. In 2019, they went 8-5. Last year, in a weird COVID year, 3-1. Here's their key games. There's 4 of them. At Michigan, that first game. At Stanford, home against Oregon, and home against Arizona State. If they can go 2-2, win the other games that they're supposed to, 10 wins for Washington. I think that's exactly what they do. I think they land exactly on that 10-win mark. Next up, USC. 2019, 11-3. Pretty good season. In 2020, 5-1. Also a pretty good season. 5 key games. First, the home game against San Jose State. Not a gimme game. You better show up and play serious. A home game against Utah, at Notre Dame, at Arizona State, and at a tricky Cal. All they have to do is go 3-2 in that stretch, win the other games they're supposed to, they'll have a 10-win season. Next up, Arizona State. 2019, they went 8-5. Last year, 2-2. I know they're having some allegations, but they still have a pretty good team right now. 4 key games that could determine if they have 10 wins or not. At UCLA, at Utah, home against USC, and at Washington. So 3 of those 4 games are on the road. I think Arizona State is close to 10 wins this year, but barely falls short. I think they'll be at the 8 or 9 win spot. Next up is Utah. 2019, 11-3. Utah was actually a dark horse to get into the playoffs in 2019. Then last year, they went 3-2. They have 5 key games on their schedule. At BYU, which I do think they'll win, but this is a rivalry. At USC, home against Arizona State, at Stanford, and home against Oregon. If they can go 3-2 in that stretch, win the other games they're supposed to, they'll have a 10-win season. I think it's close for Utah, but I think they do it. Next up, Stanford. Yeah, I've been mentioning their name left and right. They're going to be an interesting team to watch, especially at home. They have 7 games that will determine if they have a 10-win season or not. Wow. Kansas State in Arlington, at USC, home against Oregon, at Arizona State, home against Washington, home against Utah, and home against Notre Dame. They have to go 5-2 in that stretch and then win the other games. I just don't think Stanford is good enough to have 10 wins, but I do think they're good enough to upset some of these people at home. Next up, the Big 12. Iowa State. In 2019, they were 7-6. Last year, 1 win shy of 10 wins. They went 9-3. 4 key games for Iowa State to determine if they get to 10 wins or not. First one, a home game against Iowa. Great rivalry, and Iowa is good as well. At Kansas State, at West Virginia, and at Oklahoma. If they can go 2-2 in that stretch, win the other games, 10-win season for the Cyclones. I think this is going to be close, guys. I think they'll get that home game against Iowa and then 1 of those road trips. They're going to be right at that 10-win mark. I'm not talking about Oklahoma in this one. Next up, the Big 10. Ohio State off the table. I think they get to 10 wins. First team, Penn State. In 2019, 11-2. Penn State was actually having double-digit win season under James Franklin before last year, but everybody has forgotten about that because they did go 4-5 last year. They have 5 games that will determine if they have 10 wins or not. At at Wisconsin, home against Auburn, home against Indiana, at Iowa, and at Ohio State. They have to go 3-2 in that stretch and win all the other games they're supposed to. This could be close, guys. I think Penn State has the potential to have 10 wins, but I think it's more on the line of 9 wins, just short. I think that's a loss at Wisconsin and then at Ohio State, so they would have to win at Iowa, and that is really, really tough to do. Next team, a surprise team last year, Indiana. Well, sort of a surprise, because in 2019, they went 8-5. That's not bad. Last year, they went 6-2. 5 games will determine if they have 10 wins or not. At Iowa, home against Cincinnati, at Penn State, home against Ohio State, and at Purdue. If they can go 3-2 in that game and win all the other games that they're supposed to win, they'll have 10 wins. I just think Indiana falls short. I think the schedule being shortened last year benefited them. Next up, Wisconsin. In 2019, they did have 10 wins, 10-4. Last year, they went 4-3. Really, they just have 3 games that will determine if they have 10 wins or not. Home against Penn State, game against Notre Dame in Chicago, and home against Iowa. If they can win just one of those 3 games and win all the other games that they're supposed to win, they'll have 10 wins. I think Wisconsin does that easily. They could be looking at 11 wins. Big bounce back year for Wisconsin this year. Next up, Iowa. In 2019, they also had a 10-win season, 10-3. Last year, 6-2. I'm telling you, Iowa is good. 4 key games that will determine if they have 10 wins or not. Home game against Indiana, at Iowa State, a home game against Penn State, and at Wisconsin. If they can go 2-2 in those games and win all the other games that they're supposed to win, they'll have 10 wins. I think that's exactly what they do. Last conference I'm going to talk about, of course, the SEC. First, we'll talk about the SEC East. The first team, Florida. Personally, I think they take a big step back, but you never know. There's always that chance of them getting to 10 wins. In 2019, they went 11-2. Last year, 2020, they went 8-4. There's 5 games that will determine if they get to 10 wins or not. A home game against Alabama, at Kentucky, at LSU, neutral game against Georgia in Jacksonville, at Missouri. If they can go 3-2 in that stretch and win all the other games they're supposed to, they will have 10 wins. But I don't think they do that. Number one, I think they lose all those road games at Kentucky, at LSU, and at Missouri, and they lose to Alabama and Georgia. So actually, I think they lose all 5 of those. So I have Florida going 7-5 this year. Next up, Kentucky. Yes, Kentucky has a shot to get to 10 wins. In 2019, they went 8-5. Last year, they went 5-6. There's 4 games that will determine if they get to 10 wins. The home game against Missouri, the home game against Florida, at Georgia, and then the rivalry game at Louisville. If they can go 2-2, win the other games they're supposed to, they will have 10 wins. Last team in the SEC East, Missouri. 2019, they went 6-6, and in 2020, they went 5-5. 6 games that will determine if they get to 10 wins or not. At Kentucky, at a tricky Boston College, a home game against Texas A&M, at Georgia, home against Florida, and at Arkansas. I think those 6 games are just too tough to go 4-2. They would have to win 2 of those road games, and I just don't see it happening. I think Missouri will be better, but I'm thinking more like 8 or 9 wins. Now the SEC West. First up, LSU. 2019, 15-0. National champions, one of the all-time greatest teams ever. Then last year, in 2020, they went 5-5. 6 games that will determine if they get to 10 wins this year. That first game, tricky, at UCLA. UCLA will be better. At Kentucky, home against Florida, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, and home against Texas A&M. I think LSU could get close, but that's just too many tough road games for me. I think they fall in the 8 or 9 win category. Next up, Texas A&M. 2019, 8-5. Last year, 1 game short in 2020. They went 9-1. 5 games will determine if they get to 10 wins or not. The first one is that neutral game against Arkansas in Arlington, and a home game against Alabama, at Missouri, at Ole Miss, and at LSU. You need to go 3-2 in those games and win the other games to get to 10 wins. I think it's close, but I think they get there. Next up, Ole Miss. In 2019, 4-8. Last year, 5-5. 6 games could determine if they get to 10 wins or not. First up, at Alabama. That's a tough start right there. A home game against Arkansas, home game against LSU, at Auburn, a home game against Liberty, and a home game against Texas A&M. So 4 of those 6 games are at home. You have to go 4-2 to get to that 10-win mark and win the other games. This one is super, super close. I think Ole Miss can do it, but then again, they could slip up. I think 9 wins is where I see them. Next up is Auburn, and the only reason I'm mentioning Auburn is I'm getting a lot of crap from Auburn fans because they think they're winning the national championship this year. I don't know. 2019, they went 9-4. Last year, they went 6-5. 7 games that will determine if they get to 10 wins or not. First game at Penn State, at LSU, home game against Georgia, at Arkansas, home game against Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, and then a home game against Alabama. They have to go 5-2 in those games and then win the other games that they're supposed to. Auburn is not doing that. You're not getting to 10 wins this year. I don't think you'll actually make a bowl, but that's not totally out of the realm of possibility. Getting to 10 wins, that is. Let me know if I left out anybody that could be in the 10-win club. Just remember that it's automatic in my mind find that Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Ohio State will get to 10 wins. So don't suggest any of those teams. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.